Here.
Steve Tanner.
Here.
And also attending our town staff persons, Rana Monadorfer and Elisa Lichten. So on the applicants on the agenda, please respond when I call out the project. If there's more than one of you, I just need somebody to not make sure we can hear everybody. So Fallon Custom Home, 171 Reservoir.
Peter Fallon, present.
Thank you. First Avenue, One First Avenue, an informal discussion with Feldman Development.
Rick Feldman here.
Hi, thanks. And 1036 Great Plain Avenue, Needham Bank is in for a site plan review for a new teller or an ATM station.
Good evening. I'm Peter Zucker. I'm the attorney. I know Jim White and others will be joining if they're not on already.
Okay.
I'm here. Good evening. Yeah, Ron Quara, we're here.
Welcome to this open meeting of the Needham Design Review Board, which is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 2020, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Needham Design Review Board is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website on the Design Review Board page, identifying how the public may join. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. DRB meetings do not typically engage with public comment. All supporting materials have been provided to the members of this board and are available on the town's website. Public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless the chair notes otherwise. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Accordingly, please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer unless the chair approves. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. I would like to review the remote procedures for tonight's meeting. I will introduce each applicant on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will take comments or questions from the Design Review Board members. After discussion, each vote will be by a roll call vote, and the building department now requires electronic submission of building permit applications. A copy of your application, stamped and noted for the type of approval you received, will be emailed to you by the Design Review Board support staff. That can then be attached to your building permit application. So we will now start with the first item on the agenda, which is a continued hearing for Fallon Custom Homes, 171 Reservoir Street, applying for signage and lighting off that sign. So Peter, do you want to, I guess I'd like to do is let Chad bring the memo. I was not at that last meeting. So Chad, if you want to give a brief summary of the discussion, and then we'll let Peter show the new images that he's had developed. You're still muted, Chad. Thanks.
Right, thanks. Yeah, I was hearing some background noise earlier, so I muted myself just in case. So the applicant came in, as I recall, it may have been more of a square or rectilinear sign at the time. The major things we looked at were the overall shape and maybe looking at something other than a pure white background, something in a kind of a gray or muted color. We also discussed the fact that there's a lot of existing structure that was there that looked like it had been built or modified over the years. The applicant was encouraged to consider removing that and replacing it with a new structural background, and also encouraged to engage a sign manufacturer to really get into some of those details, since it would be required for the building permit in any event. We also just discussed briefly, I know it's not the sign itself, but in showing the images of the business from the street side, it looks like there's a sign on one of the canopies over the entry door that the applicant believed had not ever been permitted. So I encourage the applicant to bring in some documentation for that one as well, just so we could get it documented and recorded for record as having a formal approval. So I think in terms of the shape of the sign, the gray background, those aspects of it, I think largely conform with what we had encouraged the applicant to consider.
Thanks. I do want to say that when I first looked at this, I consider that sign a roof sign when it's mounted that high. There might be poles, might be mounted to the wall, but it's still a roof sign. And I was concerned that is not allowed by the bylaw. And so I did speak with the building commissioner, David Roche, and asked him his opinion. He said that he had spoken with you, Mr. Fallon.
Yes,
And what he relayed to me was that he agreed that it was a roof in that situation. It was a roof sign and was not allowed, but he was willing. He is the final decision maker on some of those zoning and code issues. He did say he was, I thought that he said he would be willing to accept it if most of the sign was on the wall and a portion of it was above the roof edge. So we want to consider that tonight as we review this. You didn't.
Okay, that
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's something I was not aware of with in terms of roof sign. I don't think we ever seen before, so it never come up. So that was not part of our discussion the last time.
Okay, that's why I wanted to raise it early and we could think about it. So why don't you start us off, Chad, since you already had familiarity with it.
Yeah, as I was saying, I think particularly when I look at the version of it that is on the two-dimensional drawing with a kind of architectural sheet border, overall, I think it conforms. It looks like the wording looks a little bit crowded on the ellipse, and so I could imagine if that was, I don't know, 85% the size that it is, or something like that, a little smaller, just to give it a little bit more breathing room within the oval. And I think by and large, the sign itself is consistent with what we had hoped to see. But I think where exactly it's mounted, I think is another question. If it looks like there is room for it to drop down quite a bit, that would then expose a lot more of that existing structure, that especially if you look at the image of the sign looking from behind, it's labeled as existing on rear of building. I think it's page 9 of the PDF. It looks like it is quite rusted and old. So if that was projecting above the sign, I think I would have an issue with that.
so
Okay.
the existing sign was made from tin many years ago. The brackets that are holding the sign are 1/4-inch plate steel, and they're rusty, but there's nothing structurally impacting them that they need to be wire brushed and painted. But obviously I would have a sign company that would be erecting the sign look at those and confirm that it was going to be capable of carrying the wind load and other things involved. So I have engaged a number, like 3 different sign companies. I've received some information back from 2 of the companies, but I was away last week and I haven't had a chance to follow up with them.
Okay. So, well, when looking at the image that Chad was mentioning, there's the sign and its frame and its support, those 2 support pieces. What are the 2 verticals that run through and go out beyond the view of the image of the frame of the photo?
So there was a larger sign there at one time, and those brackets will be removed, and the 2 lower brackets will be what will retain the sign, the new sign.
Okay. Steve?
First, I noticed the sign is 120 square feet, and we allow 100 square feet.
It's not 120.
Well, 8 by 15.
Well, the area of the oval as an oval is slightly less.
So
Yeah, we determine it by measuring a rectangle around the sign.
okay, I misunderstood, because when I originally had made the application, I kept the sign at 98 square feet. And we talked about going to the oval. I obviously it's drawn on a computer, so it's calculated the square footage area, also considering the sign at the front of the building, so that the total signage in the building would not exceed 100 square feet. Eric, what would you suggest?
Let's hold on, Peter. We'll get to that. Okay, Steve, anything else?
Yes, I'm interested in seeing the framing that's going to hold these sheets of aluminum. I mean, each one of those, I don't know whether they're going to be 4 by 8 sheets of aluminum, like but if you have 4 or 5 of them going horizontal, what framing is going to hold that? Certainly not this framing here. I think it needs to be determined by an engineer, not a sign company. It's quite a big sign.
Yeah, I guess the concern, Peter, is that 1/4-inch aluminum somehow attached to that existing rectangular frame. You know, that's not how a sign like this would typically be made. It'd have its own integral frame.
Correct.
And we don't, we don't see that, so we're not sure that this is a viable installation. We're concerned that it's just not going to hold up. And I know that a sign company would propose more framing, but you don't have one yet. So what I'd like to do is, I guess, focus on the design issue, and then we'll have to figure out a way to make sure that whatever approval we give, if we do, requires you to do more on the way of the framing and construction of the sign that the building inspector can then review.
Right. That was my understanding, is when I made my application, that it would be requiring me to put all of those details together. My hope was, if we could agree on the sign itself, that it would allow me to move forward with the, the structural aspect of the design. And that would be part of my application to the building department.
Okay. All right. Well, we typically like to see that as well, but I know you've already been continued once, so we want to see if we can move through this. Bob? Yep.
Yeah, thanks. And just full disclosure, I was not at the prior hearing. So thank you, Chad, for the summary. The sign in and of itself seems acceptable. I agree with the comment about the letters relative to the oval. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that it's on a highway. I have the same concerns about the structure. The diagram on the right of our page 4 of our PDF showing the 1-inch thick aluminum sticking up above the existing frame is concerning. And then lastly, the metal framework that sticks out, I'm glad to hear it's going to be repainted at least. I'll be curious about the color if you're going to try to blend it in with the building. But if the structure gets renovated, I'd love to see all of that hidden behind the oval. I don't think it's a good look to have an oval sign on a rectangular bracket. That's my concern. So that's all I have for now, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I think from a design aspect, yeah, we might consider the colors are fine. Choice material will work. We might consider Chad's and point that it could be a reduced 5% or so, just to get a little more negative space around it. The two bigger issues for me are that it is a roof sign, so we have to lower it. We have to do as the building inspector said he was willing to approve, which is something that's mostly down on the wall, not all above the building. And I don't know how you do that with that superstructure that you're trying to reuse. If it's all 1/4-inch steel angles, you can cut off the ones you don't need and use the ones that you have and weld a couple new ones in to make it all work better, rather than trying to just, leave that existing rectangle that was for a different kind of sign.
I have no problem with that. And
Okay.
I would have a structural engineer certify everything that the sign company had considered. And as I move forward, I would pick a company, we confirm the design, and I would have a structural engineer sign off and stamp on it, which I have someone I work with quite frequently that could do that for me.
Okay. Well, the other issue is that if we do that, will it still fit between the two windows? Because I don't know what we're looking at these PDFs all the time, and sometimes there's a questionable relationship between the dimensions of the signs and the actual dimensions of the buildings. So do you think that the 15 feet would still fit between those windows if the sign was lowered down so that the L's were at the top of the building?
So I had met with Dave, and he had considered the previous sign, even though it wasn't permitted, it was part of an existing condition that had been there for many years. And that was in our conversation. Obviously, until I make the application. Whatever height the sign is going to be approved, that's going to be up to him. So the brackets,
We're going to make a recommendation, so that's why we want to discuss it.
so the current sign that's there is 3 feet by 15 feet. So the new sign would cover more of the bracket since the one that's there is very narrow. And there were other signs that have since been removed prior to my ownership of the building. So the one that's there has been there forever. I don't know what year it was put up.
Yeah, there is no grandfathering in the sign by law, so what was there doesn't really mean anything, and especially if it was never permitted, then to us, it doesn't exist. It's just something that was there, and we can either work with it or not. But and I think, I think I remember when you moved into this building, and I think you've been there a while, so.
It was a warehouse before, and it was really, really unattractive with a loading dock in the front and haphazard groups of bricks and blocks. And I've put the building into a whole different state.
Yep. No, I agree. It's nice.
Thank you.
But again, in my conversation with the building inspector and as a design review board member, I know that this sign is above the roof line and it needs to be moved down. I would suggest, after given the discussion I had with Dave Roche, that maybe the top of the lettering align with the top of the building walls. And then the rest of the sign be down below. And I think that would allow you to use the vertical superstructure that exists and simply have to install a couple of horizontals to pick up the frame for the rest of the building.
Right.
So I wonder what the rest, and then cut off everything that sticks out beyond the sign.
Yes, I would absolutely do that. It's pretty unattractive.
So I wonder what other members think of that approach.
I would support that.
I would support it as well, Mark, with one caveat or question that maybe the owner would be willing to confirm that 15 feet, it'd be a shame if the 15 feet is a couple inches into each window or something. So maybe there's something we could comment about, just make it fit.
Okay.
I mean, my sense is because the curvature of the sign, when you sort of drop it down, even though it might be a little bit wider than the windows, it wouldn't overlap with the windows if it was positioned correctly.
Yeah, it may not, but it's just, I think it would be unfortunate if it just, if it just missed. I think it wouldn't look good for the building. That's all my only comment. It may not, so there might not be an issue, but I just want to get that out there that's a concern I have.
Okay, well, we'll have, one of the conditions will be to confirm that installing the sign at that height does not cover any of the windows. And if it does, the sign will be reduced 10% in overall area.
Or enough so it doesn't affect the windows. I mean, it could be 5% and we'll get it done. I'm not trying to make the sign smaller, just thinking about that. That's a minor.
Steve is trying to make the sign smaller, so.
Okay, fine. Well, we're a team effort here.
Just give me a sec to make some notes, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
So regarding the area, Steve, I guess I would be willing to allow it as taking the area, because we have at times taken the area of the actual geometry, depending, and this is not, if he was proposing a special permit size of some height, because I don't know what the size reduction would be to get to that.
13.5 to 7.2.
Okay. Well, I would like to hear what Chad and Bob think.
Well, I think if that's our bylaw, that we should hold them to it. If that's what we've done with other, people in town, I think we have to be consistent.
Okay,
That does not.
I know
preclude-
we've had applications where people have looked to exceed that, and they trip outside of what they can do by right, and at that point, it's a special permit. So is it the kind of thing where if we reduced it to the area of the bounding box, they can do that by right, but if you wanted a larger sign, that you could pursue that through a
yes,
relief special permit?
yes. So he could come back to us and get this larger size.
Yeah.
Um,
Right, so, yeah, I mean, so in other words, if we do issue an approval today, it doesn't obligate you to build only that. If you decide that you want a bigger sign, you could come back and go through a special permit process and seek the bigger sign, or be able to walk away with approval if we get to that point tonight, to do a sign that you can then go ahead and construct. with
Right, the
building
original
permit.
sign that I had requested was 12 by 8. So what I'd like to do is, knowing now in how you're looking at this, recalculate the dimensions of the oval. So the 13.5 and 7.2 may not look as good as it currently does. So I'd like to do that if that's the parameters I'm working in, and making sure that it falls under that 100 square feet, and considering the sign in the front of the building as well, and subtracting that square footage from the rear sign. So I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, the front sign is separate. It's a separate issue. It's its own element. You don't need to include it in your calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there are two things. We can continue this if you want, and you can study that a little bit and then come back with a determination, or we can issue approval with conditions, which one of the conditions would be a slightly smaller size. If you find you don't want that size, then you can go through the special
Mhm.
permit.
Yeah, I understand.
Would that work?
Yeah, that works.
That'll get you on the road to getting the sign.
Thank you.
And if you decide you don't like that oval, so.
I'll just calculate make sure it falls within the 100 square feet when,
Yeah.
squaring it off. So I understand what the goal is.
And the other condition that we're gonna make is that the building department review the actual structure of the sign and the sign mounting to the existing framework.
Right. I have no problem getting a structural engineer to stamp off on it, whatever I'm going to do.
Okay. All right, so. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And all right, so I really have 5 conditions. First is to lower the sign so that the top of the lettering aligns with the roof. Actually, 6 conditions. We want to reduce I think when we reduce the size of the sign, that'll cover the negative space will probably be adjusted. Confirm that the sign does not cover the windows at the new lower position. Remove all extra substructure supporting from the existing sign that is not used to support the new sign. And reduce the size to 100 square feet when it's in a rectangle drawn around the sign. And then also confirm the sign framework from a sign manufacturer. Does that cover everything?
Does I have
Okay,
sorry.
so I would take a motion to those items, that motion that we approve this sign with those conditions.
So moved.
Seconded,
Okay, we come to the vote. Bob Dermody,
Yes.
Chad Riley,
Yes.
Steve Tanner,
Yes,
and the chair approves. Right, so we'll get this written up for you, Peter, and get it back to you.
Thank you. I have a quick question. If I were to apply for a sign above the roof and having you guys all together on this meeting, what are my odds of that being approved?
None from me. So,
None from you? Thank you. No. Does anyone else have an
and
opinion?
that one has been pretty strictly enforced. There's only been a few applications. Steve's been there longer than me, but I don't think I've seen 3 or 4. Yeah, so it's not usually even attempted, and that's probably good advice.
Okay, just the elevation of the road and the building are relevant as far as the view of the sign.
Yeah, we understand, but yeah, there's no conditions in the bylaw that let us deviate for those reasons.
build a second story in the building.
I don't have the land area. I would have done that a long time ago. An excellent suggestion that I would love to have done, but George Genta told me not a chance, and we won't use the word. But I
Okay,
think you get where I'm going with it. But
Well, thank you for what you've done for it so far.
thanks, Peter.
Yep.
all right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, before we're done, he also submitted a light.
Yes,
If I could amend the condition. You need to get lighting reviewed by the sign manufacturer. This light fixture is way beyond what you need to do what you're doing. So
sure.
you could do something. So I think I would seek unanimous consent from the board to add the condition that the lighting be redesigned by the sign company.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Any adjustments? Okay,
Agree.
all right, thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Good catch, Mark.
All right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Next item is 1 First Avenue. They're proposing a new building in the Acapulco site, right? Is that what I'm looking? So please, Mr. Feldman, go ahead.
I still call it the Howard Johnson site.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Rick Feldman, Feldman Development Partners. Mr. Chair and the committee, thank you for this opportunity to, present, in this informal session, what we're proposing. I also have introduced our team, which is Jamie McManus, the owner, and Axel Solberg, our architect from Harrison French Associates. But the big picture is that it's probably time to replace the Acapulco on this site. Obviously we've had some plans over the time. COVID sort of interrupted a little bit of our flow, but we're looking to obviously make a big improvement, not only to the gateway of Needham, but certainly the gateway of the Needham Innovation Park and that whole district there. As you probably have observed over the years, it's a very tight site. We've met with the planning staff recently in the building department and engineering to get some of their feedback. And it was where their input to have this presentation before you and your committee to get some of your input. In terms of the plan itself, we're looking to do, a retail building, possibly with a restaurant use. We've not made any major tenant decisions at this point, but we want to get a feedback on your input for the construction at this stage. I could probably introduce, actually formally turn it over to Axel Solberg, the architect, and can present a little bit of the elevations and the renderings that we have proposed, and then we can take it from there. Axel, do you want to share your screen with the recent plan?
Absolutely. I'll take it away. I assume I have that type of functionality. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
Okay, can everybody see the screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, greetings, everybody. My name is Axel. I'm the leader of the development design studio here at Franklin's office of HFA. So on the screen here, you see a couple of conceptual perspectives, which we've prepared in conjunction and working with Rick and Jamie. And the overall intent, as Rick pretty succinctly summarized, is to create an attractive and flexible retail building that can support a variety of tenants. Currently, it's big enough to support comfortably 3 tenants. The signage that you see here is just illustrative for review purposes only. Of course, everything would comply with Chapter 5. So, any dimensional constraints would be worked out by the tenants later. Really, we're just concerned with the exterior core and shell of the architecture itself. So given the familiarity of this location and its kind of prominence as you come off the highway, we really kind of did want to use this site as an opportunity to create a new gateway into that innovation district behind. And we did draw some inspiration from the existing buildings in that office park through the use of masonry, veneer. There's also some wood plank cladding. This could be a variety of different types of products. And then panels, which could be either metal, fiber reinforced cement, or some other synthetic type of material. And then we have a horizontal corrugated metal to facilitate just a little break in the massing and emphasize some signage areas. So overall, there is the configuration of the site, which I believe everybody has seen for now. Actually, it's probably, I'm assuming that everybody already has seen this imagery. So my talking points will sort of assume that, but if anybody wants me to stop at any point to ask detailed questions, please feel free to chime in.
Axel, just orient them on the site plan where this is on first.
That's exactly where I was going next. So here we have, let's see, this is the survey of the site. So right here, this is Highland Avenue. You're coming off of the highway here. This is where the old Acapulco's building is. You can see the footprint on the survey of the site. So now if we go back to the key plan here, Highland Avenue, if we're looking at this key plan, is right here. And the entrance off of the highway is here. The Acapulco's building was generally somewhere right around here. And so from this side, we're looking at this perspective from the vantage point of standing in the parking lot, looking at the side of the building which faces inwards towards the Innovation District. Down here, you could imagine yourself in a vehicle on Highland Ave waiting at the stoplight, and this is what you would see here. So this is kind of just a basic visualization. Further renderings would be a little bit more polished than this, but I think this gives the overall vibe and design intent that we're going for. So the massing varies in height just to provide a little bit of differentiation for each tenant. So again, here's the elevation unfolded view looking at the building from the parking lot, the new parking lot that we would be creating. So on the right, we have, I apologize, actually, this view here is from Highland Avenue. So on the right, you have the bank tenant. In the middle, you have the retail tenant. On the left, you have the restaurant tenant. The building is designed to be four-sided, quote unquote, so that way, really any vantage point of the building, it feels like you're looking at the front of the building. There is no back of house that you're seeing, so no ugly facade is presented to any one perspective. Signage area is maintained at a comfortable eye level up above the grade. We have a maximum height of 28 feet, which of course is still well within the means allowed by zoning. When viewed from the parking lot here, the retail tenant is given a little bit more height to establish dominance, knowing that bank tenants aren't necessarily usually so concerned about the pop of the brand, given that the location normally sells itself. And then the restaurant tenant here, we wanted to go for a little bit more of a modern, sleek vibe, knowing that there are some restaurant tenants whom we could go after to take up residence in this project who are attracted to this type of an aesthetic. So the areas that you see shaded gray here in the storefront elevations would be spandrel glass or opaque. And the reasoning for that move is to provide the restaurant tenant some sort of privacy or screening for the back of house functions that normally accommodate commercial kitchens or things like that. So that way you keep all the inner functions hidden, and then really the only area that you have transparency into is the actual seating area itself. So that way you can see all the vibrancy and the activity that's happening inside. So here's that, kind of how that would look. So you see the opaque panels up here provide some privacy, and then the interior design would shine through in that regard. I think overall that's the nutshell summary of the building. For the retail tenant, we did give them a prefabricated type of suspended canopy just to provide some cover from the elements. And of course, the restaurant tenant has a pretty comfortably sized seating patio, which would be landscaped and developed to, use a nice texture of materials, create an ambiance that invites people in from the surrounding innovation district. And then the bank as well. And our site plan right now is preliminary at best, but it's showing proof of concept that we can achieve some configurations of parking which get a good count. And this is just one of the few options that we've explored, but here you can sort of see the intent behind what would happen with the landscape area. So I think on that note, I've probably talked for long enough, and I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Yeah, I could just sort of add, in terms of the theme, today's retail very much is very into glazing and glass, whether it be cafe, restaurant, even banks. So the intent was to have a lot of glass in the building. We didn't really want to introduce any more red brick to the innovation district. There's enough of it right now with the various buildings and office buildings and residential uses there. So we want this to stand out. But we realized this is a very important gateway, not only to the city, but certainly to the innovation district. And so I think that we've instructed Axel, and he's been very successful coming up with kind of a unique looking building, but very attractive, certainly very contemporary, but in terms of scale, fits the site very well.
All right, thank you. That was very thorough. So Bob, do you want to start off with question, comments?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that presentation. Looks good overall. A couple questions, they may or may not be in our purview, but I'll just throw them out there. You're probably thinking about them with the planning board. Is in the site plan just looks real close to First Avenue. So I'd be curious to what the actual setbacks are. And then somewhat related to that, for any of the spaces, you commented on back of house, but like deliveries, dumpsters, trash removal, those kinds of things, and how might that affect the look of the building? That's more of our concern. Certainly, I think site plan is more planning board, but that's what's going through my mind right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, the setbacks is something that we're aware of, and we're definitely going to bring that up with the planning board. As far as service, even though the building is designed to have a front on each face, the facade that faces Highland Avenue would technically be that back of house facade. And so each of these egress doors, which you see here, is intended to provide function for deliveries and services and things like that. And our intent is to use a sidewalk and a path which leads you to the back corner of the site. So you can sort of see the intent of the sidewalk illustrated here. And then this sidewalk would then carry you to the rear of the site where dumpsters and trash would be.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And I can comment also right now in this recent world of retail, most of the deliveries now are coming from the house with UPS, FedEx, Amazon, and even there's a lot of retailers that don't want to have a rear entrance for their staff or delivery because of pilferage, whatever. So the trends in the world have changed recently. So it's like everybody's now coming in the front of the house and making it work. And we do have kind of a remote dumpster locations that's sort of skewed over the end of the site there, and that will be obviously protected with a fence, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess the only comment would be as you go forward, the planning board will probably make you come back if you make modifications, and also for landscaping review. But we always like to see what those enclosures are and how they work with the building. So whenever you figure that out, and you're back with landscaping and some of the other items, it'd be great if you include that in that return. Chad, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the main things that Bob hit on were exactly what I was thinking about. I do notice in the package that there's sort of like a light scheme and a dark scheme. I'm guessing that the lighter scheme where the bank is light and the central kind of boutique pavilion is on the lighter side is a bit more versatile when it comes to attracting tenants. And the cafe, in the rendering, it kind of looks like it's black, whether it was really like a black or, like more of a space gray or something like that, is probably worth exploring. But yeah, I think that's the darker scheme. So I'm guessing that the other ones just might be a little bit more versatile in terms of range of tenants and things like that. And maybe this is a more updated version, but the packet we have, there's 2 different pages of renderings. So that doesn't look quite like, no, actually, that is the one we have. So yeah, I think that was the one that I'm thinking, lighter colors, maybe more appealing to a bank. The lighter color in the middle might be more appealing to a broader range of retail tenants, but I think the light with the wood is a little bit better in the middle with the boutique than the dark with the wood. And then in that one, is it, I don't know if necessarily you want to go all the way black or something a bit more metallic or something like that in the cafe area.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with your commentary on the colors. We wanted to entertain a couple of options at this point, just knowing that some tenants have preferences for certain color palettes. As far as going black on the panels, we would probably, it would depend on the material of the panel itself. True black can often absorb a lot of heat and start to warp over time. So that's always a concern that we have. Most manufacturers of metal panels and even fiber cement products don't offer a true black. So, but there are solutions of achieving that type of a bold statement as well. But yeah, absolutely, we intend on exploring the colors a little bit further as this progresses.
Okay, well, yeah, to follow up on that, I think. Is this so far the preferred scheme, the one that you're showing now, or is there not really a preference yet? You're still evaluating?
I suppose that would be a matter of a subjective response on my part. And so I'll say that I personally prefer this option with the lighter paneling for, at least for the boutique tenant. I think it also works well for the bank and allows, a neutral background for a multitude of brands. On this side, I think something more of along the lines of a gunmetal or kind of a dark kind of metallic gray would be nice. So this would be my personal preference. If you were to ask a couple of the other designers in my office, there are some who favor this one.
Okay.
But I think the intent is not really to be more, it's not black really, it is more the gunmetal look.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not something we would dictate to you. We might have an opinion and advise, but I think you've heard Chad's comments that with the wood look, the lighter materials seem to work better in that central section to me as well. Your options on the other two are really, I guess I would leave that to you at this point. Steve?
I think Bob and Chad have covered it rather well, and I don't have any additional comments.
Okay.
Well, one other thing that I will throw in, I know that you indicated the signage is just there to sort of demonstrate, but I appreciate you showing it because a lot of times we see buildings where they haven't considered where it would go. But I would be mindful of representing something that is not permittable. My guess is that there are 2 street adjacencies that you have, but if the bank thinks that they're going to have 3 equal signs on either side, the bylaw doesn't allow for that. So the renderings might be representing things that tenants are not allowed to do as of right. So I think just whereas you'll be the landlord of some of those tenants who are coming in for signage, I would be mindful of what the bylaws allow for, and some of the things that you're showing right now, might be a bit of a challenge for them to get permitted.
Yeah, in a multi-tenant building, we often look at a compound sign, which has all the tenants on it. And this building design does sort of set up 3 identifiable different volumes on the building. So it's a little less of an issue, but the approach you would have to take would be a special permit for anything beyond 1 sign for each of those locations. So if you wanted to also have the end conditions and then Highland Ave as well. So you might just adjust the renderings so that the size of those is at least in the requirements. The one at the end of the ramp has a different allowance than the others, but you're going to want to be careful about how the building looks when you have the combination of a potentially 100 square foot sign or 60 square foot sign with a 32 square foot sign, and sort of balance those issues out. So I think that's a good point that Chad brought up, that it's not too early to start considering what would happen if those had to be all different sizes, and how would you work through that? And that as you promote the building, you'll be in a better position, and you won't leave a tenant coming to us and us going, no, you can't do that. And they say, but the renderings had it.
Yeah.
So,
No, we do appreciate that. We've been working, over the last, several months about a location for the Needham Innovation District sign, with the town and all those other tenants there. We were trying to just situate this building first, but that will continue also. That's going to probably be a pylon sign somewhere just off of Highland Avenue that will introduce people to the park.
yeah, we've reviewed that signage before with them, and I've had discussions informally with them about possible locations. So, yeah, it's good that you're considering that as well.
Yep.
So that's, I think, our comments for now. And but I think it's a great start. Should be a nice building, and we look forward to seeing you as it gets more developed. I hope that input is helpful.
Very,
No,
very much.
this feedback is helpful. I mean, obviously, any other comments, we'll probably, put an application in fairly soon, to move ahead. We'd like to get this development going, eventually take the Acapulco down. We realize it's a collective eyesore for the whole town, and move ahead with this.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Well, that was fun.
A little different.
Yeah. So the next item is 1036 Great Plain Ave, Needham Bank. I let Peter take it over.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I got to ask Bob, is that a real picture behind? Is
It's
that
a real
really
photo.
behind you?
It's a real photograph, but I am not
Real
on a-
photograph. Okay. I was getting a little jealous there for a second.
That's almost his real view.
Yeah, almost. That is, if you're curious, that's the view from the lighthouse in Situate.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Peter Zucker. I'm the attorney on this project. Also on is Jim White, who's the executive vice president and chief administrative officer. And somebody else who's also comes up as Peter Zucker is Ron Quaquaro, who's the project architect with Studio Q. Probably shows up as me because I think I forwarded him the invite. So just quickly, then I'm going to turn it over to Ron. The bank is essentially, I'm going to use the word modernizing. Essentially, as banking habits change, the bank tries to keep up with that. And we have a combination of things going on here that's brought this project on. One is that, and it was coming before COVID, but COVID really brought it on, where the number of people who actually visit a bank or conduct bank activities at a bank has dramatically decreased. Basically, they have seen a significant increase in online and electronic banking, including, God bless her, my 90-year-old mother, who does use Needham Bank, and decreasing the number of people who physically come to the bank. And when they do come to the bank, they either want to go to a teller window or an ATM. In addition to that, the bank itself, in terms of its own employees, and this really came about COVID, where many of the bank employees were required to and were able to work at home, remote working, and the bank is keeping that going. And so between those two things, what the bank is intending to do is to convert an existing mezzanine area of about 1,365 square feet inside the existing building, convert that to an area for the executive offices, and that would free up some of the other spaces being used for those times when customers do come into the bank, more for mortgage applications or other private reasons. They'll have, private, they'll use the conference rooms there as private areas for them. And probably more why we're here tonight is that Currently, the site has an existing drive-up ATM. We're looking to remove that and replace it with a drive-up freestanding ATM. Replace it with a drive-up teller building with a drive-up ATM. And I believe that whole building area is 321 square feet. Prior to coming to you, we did have several meetings with the staff that helped us site the buildings where they are. We have a split zone here, so the accessory uses of the drive-through needs to be in the upper area, which is why the ATM is currently where it is. And again, so they helped us cite it especially in terms of some of the setbacks on the side, which we now believe we've accomplished to meet the zoning regulations. And I believe we're before the planning board next week. So, but that was by way of intro. Ron, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. And thank you all for having us tonight. So you've seen the submission. Is the best process here to just go through with you all? Is that what you'd like to see? We'll kind of go through sheet by sheet. What works for you all?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and explain it to us? I think everyone's familiar with the location, but that would be,
Okay.
you want us to take the screen and show at least the site plan and then the architectural renderings. That would be great.
Thank you. Sounds good. So you can all see my screen, hopefully.
Yeah, but there's nothing there yet, Ron. There it is.
Okay, great. So I think I'll spend a few minutes on this plan here. And then we'll go to the renderings, and then we can talk about the elevations if you want to look at proportions. They're basically 4 sheets total. So I think Peter mentioned we're a little over 300 square feet. The location, if you can see the site plan, let me know if it hasn't come up on your screen yet, but on the left-hand side here, you can see Great Plain Ave and Garden Street, and this island piece right here between the 2 curb cuts, that area is where we're planning on locating this. Essentially, you know, we worked to kind of balance working with the context, matching the existing main branch, and then still having a building that can kind of stand alone. There's essentially a drive-up window with some millwork, a support person, some equipment, copy machine, etc., printing within the space, and then a bathroom. That is essentially the entire program. There's a canopy that comes out over the first lane fully, and then about a halfway over the ATM, which is in this island. So 2 lanes is what we're looking to accommodate. There is an existing wall that's in place now that stays. We're within the setbacks. There's a main entrance kind of tower piece. You'll see the sort of massing in a minute. And then we screen any mechanical equipment to the rear of the building. Now, you know, we're kind of embarking on the design development phase. So I think what we've shown here isn't even very accurate. There'll probably be 1 condenser, one of those half condensers that go with like a Mitsubishi split system. I think the mechanics will be very simple in this building. So I go to the renderings, you know, you kind of get a sense of what we're planning on doing. This is a good view, I think, on the upper left of when you approach the building from Garden. You kind of see that tower element, and then there's a kind of main body that comes along to the far end of it. Any signage you see is placeholders. That's a totally separate permit and process is our intent. But again, we tried to balance working with the context and still having a building that matches the main office and having enough character and mass to be able to stand on its own as well. If you kind of walk down that walk and turn and look back, you'll see the building from this view and the main branch, the parking area. This is on the lower left is a view of the parking area, and then the lower right, the actual drive-up lanes. You know, anytime you have a drive-up and a canopy, you need to strike a balance that you don't end up having a, what looks like a gas station or some service canopy. So we've added some detail and try to integrate what we did with the canopy into some of the detailing of the overall mass of what's being proposed. The palette essentially is what's there now. There will be a combination of brick and precast with some of this white trim, the rusticated base, the soldier course banding, all intended to be part of this new design as well. We're dialing the details a little bit just to add a little more character, try to get this building to be a little more of a gem. Because it's so small, we can afford to go the extra mile. So that's essentially the big picture. I can talk a little more about some of the detailing if you like, or just go into questions. There was a request for a wall section. It's here for reference. I think you can see that there's a brick and a precast base that is rusticated and comes forward.
Okay. That was very good. Thank you. So Steve, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Chad?
Overall, I think it's a handsome little building. It's the size and the functionality are definitely tricky, and I think you've handled it well. On the west elevation, I like the idea of a graphic element there. I think when we are really kind of looking at signage, we'll have to be a little mindful of what we consider a graphic element and what we consider a true sign. On the parking lot side, the east elevation, that element that's just labeled as branding is a little bit bigger. So that's also one where it'll be a little tricky to sort of figure out what exactly that is and does it constitute a sign, and how many signs do we really have on a building that's so small. The only real thing that I'm kind of thinking about is that the entry, which is for staff to go in, might to some people look like a way to get into another ATM, even though that's probably really on the building. And so you might run into some issues with the general public trying to walk in there, but it's a locked door. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But overall, I think it's well handled.
I think that was our intention with the drive-up banking label on it, but you're right. Today, a lot of them, because of the way that drive-up ATM is situated today, it's not really designed well. People get out of their cars and sometimes get in line with other cars too. And so this would correct all of those old problems we have today too.
Okay. Bob?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I concur with Chad's comments. I think it's apparent I think this will help the issues just mentioned. I think it's understandable what it is. I'm just going to ask a question. I'm really curious to get a reaction. Did the team ever consider a pitched roof?
We actually had a number of iterations that we worked through. A pitched roof was one of them.
Okay.
This seemed to work better with the existing architecture, which is why we ultimately went in this direction. The pitched roof was a little bit less contextual than this, so we ultimately went this route.
Okay. No, I often ask questions like this in these meetings. We don't see all the stuff that's back on your desk, so it's good to hear that there were some iterations. And what had occurred to me, why I brought it up, is in one view you look back towards the bank, which does actually have a gable on the on that north side, but then you look at the neighborhood houses. I'm not sure it would work either. It's such a tiny building. It might look kitschy actually, but I'm glad to hear it was at least looked at.
It's a good point. the building is so small. It's a little bit taller than it needs to be. But again, I mentioned, the presence, it needs to have a presence, otherwise it'll look like a pump station, So we were, purposeful about that. We also have a minimum height for this drive up, and we wanted the proportion of the drive up canopy to anchor into something bigger and taller. And this sort of massing seemed to work better.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else right now, Mark.
Okay. Did want to ask while we have you, how is the lighting going to work? I see a couple sort of wall sconces in a couple situations, but what are the requirements for for instance, the ATM, which is available, I assume, 24 hours a day?
So the lighting right now, we're still working through it, but the majority of it is down lighting.
Okay.
So we will have lighting that's kind of localized to this area that's relative to the building. The sconces are low-level accent lighting. That's the intent right now. Open for further development.
Okay.
And the parking lot existing lighting will be relocated close to where it is today. And so it will remain in its place.
Okay, and I would concur. I do like the scale and the massing, and I really like the way you use the materials from that existing bank addition. I think this is really a step up from how they were used even there, and it's just a nice mix. And I think it's a good scale. I understand Bob's question about a pitched roof, but as I look at it, that would just add to the scale, and the fact that you made it a little taller than it absolutely had to be, but it's again sort of narrow and long. I think that works out really well. So I think it's not very nicely done. My last question would be if you go back to the plan that you had, and I'm trying to find my site plan. The landscaping plan is different, shows different planting around the mechanicals than the landscape, shows a different plant than this sketch, but I'm going to assume you'll work that out with the planning board.
Yeah, this planting is in an intent versus a document for construction.
Okay.
So that's what the planning board's going to see is more current, more accurate, I should say.
Yeah, because I was just looking through the planting plan. I think it's a nice amount of planting. It's that I do remember that, and you showed it in your illustrations, that the ground is raised along the sidewalk, so there's that low stone wall there. I guess the one thing as I look at this, and this is something I looked at right away, and I go in and out of that parking lot a fair amount as a customer, that you're not changing the island on I don't know if everybody remembers, but this is partly town parking, partly Needham Bank parking. They shared the land and developed a workable parking lot layout that wasn't necessarily restricted to either property's boundaries exactly. And I see the exit from sort of the double row of parking closest to the current bank. And right now that wiggles around that island and exits out to the street, similar in a similar way to the one on the left, but it looks like it's a little bit more of an effort at this point. And I'm concerned, we will make the point of the planning board, I'm sure they'll ask, is there any consideration to taking that first parking space away that's not, if you go past the driving lane,
right here.
Yeah, if there's an island and just move that island over a little bit so that exiting for the people leaving those bank spaces isn't directly into, a poor driver, I'd be concerned about. I guess you're citing the ATM machine back far enough that it's not an issue, but there is some serious overlap there. So
Yeah. So
we took that away, didn't we?
I just want to mention, Jim, just real quick, This is this drawing was developed before the civil and landscape architecture drawings were developed that are going before the board. So those will supersede this. These are architect's drawings that show the building. That's really what we want to, if you can, focus on. While your points are valid, and we're going to take them into the site planning portion of this. These are anything related to the site was intent and was picked up by the civil team after this was issued to you folks.
Okay, so yeah, well, I'm sure the planning board will make you look at it anyway. So I just want
right.
If this is the way you were going, there may be some more discussion, but other than that, I think that's very well done. So this is part of your site plan review. So what we do is we send a memo with our comments and any recommendations to them. So we will prepare that and get that to them for their meeting with you. Next week, you said?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, we're on, I think it's the 16th.
Okay. All right, busy week. That's good. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item are the minutes of June 6th, 2022. Let me get those. And Bob was not there, so I would take a motion to, any questions or comments on those minutes? So Steve and Chad, I would take a motion to approve those
So
minutes.
moved.
And a second.
Seconded. Yeah, seconded.
Chad Riley,
Yes.
Steve Tanner,
Approved.
and the chair approves. All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm wondering if we want to modify the bylaw a little bit. The geometry measurement is for the issue when we have like individual letters and different lines and sometimes some other element. And then we've got to sort of contain it somehow. And I think that's what that was written for. But when we get a solid geometry, I really don't feel like it's fair to apply a rectangle square footage to something that's so contained in a geometry. So we might want to think about if we want to propose a change to that.
Yeah. My recollection was that was actually one of the suggestions made to the applicant too. If you made it an oval, then you cut out some of the square footage.
Yeah.
So I think he did what he was steered to do.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, if he would make that, he's been waiting a long time to bother to do this. So I think if he makes the effort to get the special permit, we can take a look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? All right. So I would accept a motion to adjourn. That was
So
Bob.
moved.
And then, okay. Steve seconded.
Okay,
Got that, Rana?
second.
All right.
Yes.
And we come to vote. Bob Dermody. Yes, again, he says.
Yeah.
Chad Riley,
Yes.
Steve Tanner,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thanks, we're adjourned. It was good. Our next meeting is the 22nd.